in the wrong neighborhood. Get out. Get out.
Rolling.
Where?
I really don't care.
Okay.
Because you don't belong in this development.
Yeah?
Okay.
What's your name?
I'm not telling you.
We live here. I live here.
Okay, where do you live?
Why would we tell you any of this?
Where do you live?
I'm not telling you.
Where do you live?
I'm not telling you.
Okay, not a problem. I'm gonna call the gate and have you all arrested.
You're not
Okay.
You do not deserve to be in
Okay.
here.
Okay. What did we even do wrong?
Seriously? I have to wait.
We just noticed you've been following us
You
everywhere.
right now?
Yeah.
You know why? Because you don't belong in my city.
How we from here?
But you understand, I know who my people are, right? Who belongs here, who doesn't?
Who
We
don't?
got gang war.
That letter was delivered to the Copes household here in Lindenhurst yesterday, and it touched off a wave of emotions for mom Darcel Copes, her 3 grown children, and 5 small grandchildren who all share the home behind me. Now, the letter carries with it a blatant message of racism. It reads in part, "Attention African-American family. This is coming from the community. Lindenhurst is 84% white. You don't belong here. Please leave as soon as you can."
Get off of my door. Get off. No, get off of my door. Get off of my door. Get off of my door. Back up. Back up. Back up. Back up. Back up. Why you? Because we black? That's you? What?
Yeah.
Because we black.
Because you don't fit in the neighborhood, that's why.
System malfunction. System malfunction.
The moral of the story is you don't belong here and we don't want you around these parts. I wanted to talk about this incident that happened to me just a few years back, which put in perspective for me that much of this division between people is still alive and well in today's world. But before we dig into it, I will forever be grateful for your support. So if you can like this video, please subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell for all updates. So let's take a moment of silence while I give you some time to do that. Now, in the interest of time, let's just get straight to it. A couple of years back, I was needing to relocate to be more strategically positioned for my job. So you know how it is. I started searching around on the web. I downloaded a few apps to simplify the process. But when you're having to move, it's never just that simple. It's extremely difficult trying to find a balance in everything that you're looking for in your new place. Like, how close is it to shopping areas? Are there walking trails? Is it far from the beach? Is it safe? And more importantly, what is the demographic makeup of the people you'll be living around? Nevertheless, my search began. I knew I wanted something that was open and spacious and no more than a few blocks from the ocean, in a friendly neighborhood with little to no crime. I needed ample parking and I wanted an unseen homeless population because I knew after living in Los Angeles proper, I would never want to deal with those problems ever again. So I found some cool spots and ended up making a few appointments to tour the places that looked good on paper. The first place I made an appointment at was damn near right on the beach. It was about a half a block off the water and checked all the boxes that I wanted at the new spot. I ended up making an appointment with a rental agent one late morning. It was a beautiful Southern California day. When I parked my car, I realized I had gotten there early, so I decided to sit there for about 15 to 20 minutes just to soak up the environment and get a feel for the community. I noticed that all the homes were really nice and very well kept. The lawns were very well manicured, and there were noticeable upper middle class cars parked on the streets, which oftentimes is a telltale sign of the type of community it is. But while I was sitting in my car, I noticed something. 100% of the people who came in and out of their homes, or those that were walking their dogs or just milling throughout the community, were all Caucasian people. And although I grew up around many Caucasians, some of who are my closest friends today, I am still always a tad bit leery or hesitant to interact with them if they don't approach me first with a warm and inviting welcome. Not because I think they're gonna be violent or anything. I'm more concerned with the uncomfortable questions from them that I'm gonna have to smile through while answering. And you know, more times than not, they would just be regular questions that any two people would have. But I always feel that there is malice laced in their questions because it's always the same thing. Do you live around here? What do you do for work? Where are you from? Are you an athlete? Do you know anybody around here? Those who know what I'm talking about already know. So after about maybe 20 minutes of just chilling there and taking it all in, I eventually have to get out of my car so that I can make the scheduled appointment to view this place. I had to park my car about 60 or 70 yards away from the actual apartment because that was the only spot open on the street, which was about 60 or 70 yards away from the actual apartment. So I eventually get out of my car and I start walking. And as I'm walking down the sidewalk, about 2 or 3 homes in front of me on my right-hand side, there's an older gentleman coming out, and then he turns around to lock the door, but he hasn't recognized me yet. So by the time I get parallel to where he was, he finishes locking the door, and by the time he's done, I have probably gotten parallel to where he was on the sidewalk, so he has to walk down his walkway to get to the sidewalk. So by the time he turns around to see me, when I tell you that this man was surprised, it was like he had saw a ghost. I felt like he thought that I was gonna come accost him or rob him or something like that, because he paused for about 3 to 4 uncomfortable seconds before he cracked a half smile and then raised his hand to say hello. But for me, this is standard operation. This is just what it is. So I continued down the sidewalk path, and up in front of me, there was a couple that was walking a dog, a man and a woman. So as we were approaching each other, closing the distance, I decided to walk in the grass to get off of the sidewalk so that they can have some room for them and their dog. And as I got about 5 feet to them, I smiled and nodded my head in affirmation, and they acted as if they didn't even see me. But it wasn't until I passed them that I heard their footsteps stop. So I turned my head to the right to see what I can see out of my peripheral, and they had fully stopped, turned around, and watched me to see where I was going. All I could do was chuckle inside, and I just continued on down the sidewalk, headed to this apartment. And as I was walking my way there was another lady that had just turned the corner, and she also had a dog. She stopped at the corner, like 5 feet before you even get to the corner. She pulled her dog closer to her, like there was a bundle of hazardous waste or something like that that she didn't want her dog to get close to. But once again, she just stared at me, and I crossed the street, continuing on my way. So I eventually get to the address, and there's a tall Caucasian gentleman, tall dude, he's probably like 6'4". He comes out to greet me, a little uncomfortable. He eventually shakes my hand, and he started explaining all the features, a little bit about the history of the place, who owns it, the community layout, the good restaurants, the coffee shops, and so on and so forth. So after I completed the tour, I eventually jumped back in my car, and I was just out of sorts. You know, very uncomfortable. The whole entire experience from start to finish was not what I expected, but a large part of me was really angry.
What you gonna do? What you gonna do?
And all I can think of was redlining and the history of this horrible covenants. I was confused at how is it that a community in Southern California could be completely white? I didn't see any Hispanic, I didn't see any nannies, I saw no chocolate people. I realized that this had to be a result of redlining. And if you don't know the history of redlining and how wealth is concentrated, or they keep wealth from certain portions of the population, then take a listen to this and you'll have a better understanding of where this injustice has taken place and who this injustice has affected.
The neighborhoods where we grow up can determine the trajectory of our lives, from the money we earn to how long we live. And it's not by accident. America was built this way. And Jesus Hernandez has mapped those inequalities block by block.
I was able to measure every social ill in the city.
Like what?
Where are your dropouts from high school? Where are the people who get the flu? Where are the people who use more water than others?
His work has shown that all of it connects back to one factor over and over again, and that factor is race.
You have these racial patterns that represent a geography of where we shifted our people over the period of 100 years in developing the city. And we can pretty much do this in every city in the United States.
Why? Well, about a century ago, legal language was often written into the deeds of houses, prohibiting selling them to people who weren't white. They were called race covenants, and they built racism into the housing system across the country.
White neighborhoods wound up with advantages that still shape modern cities.
We met Hernandez in Sacramento, Land Park to be exact, one of the city's oldest and wealthiest neighborhoods.
And this was one of the areas when it first started developing where race covenants were first used in Sacramento. And so this is where you start seeing this divide between neighborhoods start to happen.
A neighborhood like this one enjoys all the benefits of a century of preferential treatment and public investment. It gets a light rail service. Businesses choose to relocate here. It has bike lanes, bus service, everything that a city dweller would want. Let's compare two neighborhoods just 3 miles apart. This is Land Park. This is South City Farms. 77.3% of people living in Land Park are white. In South City Farms, 8% are white, 52% are Latino, and 9% are black. 40% of people in Land Park have at least a 4-year degree. In fact, 28% have a master's degree or higher. In South City Farms, only 2.3% graduated from college. In Land Park, 71% of people own their home. In South City Farms, only 25% do. A person living in Land Park is likely to live 10 years longer than someone living in South City Farms. And while average household income in Land Park is over $132,000 a year, in South City Farms, it's just $28,000. Tell me about this neighborhood in contrast to the other one we saw.
So what you see here is that concentration of race and poverty and every other social ill that you see that's associated with divestment.
You may think to yourself, sure, good and bad neighborhoods, so what? Well, again, it's not coincidence. If you look at the race covenant neighborhoods across Sacramento or any city, the pattern is shocking. In these neighborhoods of Sacramento, education, home ownership, health are all different than these neighborhoods. What's the difference? Well, these neighborhoods were exclusive to whites under race covenants from at least 1913 to 1948 when the covenants became illegal. And banks and lenders used the race of non-white owners to downgrade home values until 1978. That means all that time, white neighborhoods accumulated wealth, political clout, public investment, while other neighborhoods, which also paid their share of taxes, received little or no investment. They even lost money. Other systems deepened the divide. The Federal Housing Administration, which was created to make home loans affordable after the Great Depression, refused to back them in African-American neighborhoods, a policy called redlining. And while the GI Bill helped white Americans get low-interest mortgages, it shut out African-American vets.
Now you see these people here that have to leave the neighborhood for better resources rather than stay here. And when they leave the neighborhood, they actually take their checkbook with them. When they go by in another neighborhood, when they go to get health care in another neighborhood, when they go to school in another neighborhood.
Because they don't have any of those things here. They can't walk here to a grocery store, a school, a hospital.
That's exactly right.
When a neighborhood has had so little money for so long, it takes superhuman effort to provide what the community needs. The city closed this elementary school in 2013. It's now home to a nonprofit called La Familia, run by Rachel Rios.
So when you look at what healthy communities look like, you look at the support services that families can go to, libraries, public transportation, parks, beautiful trees. And when you look at our community, you don't see that. You don't see an investment. You see nonprofits trying to fill in the gap as best we can.
So you provide the only play field in this whole neighborhood?
Yeah, there is not a park here, so this is it.
Racism is not just about our individual attitudes. It's built into our systems.
It's not as blatant as I'm going to oppress this community. It's more subtle than that, and that's the problem with it, is that it is more subtle, and we seem to accept it because it is subtle. So how is it that this community doesn't deserve to have the bus stop? How is it that this community doesn't deserve to have a park? That's where the systemic racism comes into place.
So how do we change nearly a century of inequality? This is not a problem the people of a neighborhood can change on their own, Hernandez says.
You have to directly intervene in the mechanisms that create this inequality.
You have to put your thumb on the scale in some way and change
put your
it.
stick in the spokes and stop that bicycle from moving. And if you don't do that, that racial spatial wealth gap will continue to widen.
And neighborhoods like this continue to get left behind.
Correct.
What do you think about this? What do you think about this?
What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you
Many of you may already be familiar with redlining and understand that this is the reason why certain communities look like they do and others don't. Why a particular swath of the population is able to send their kids to colleges, open up businesses, and to parlay that money into the generation of making more of it. While on the flip side, others don't have two dimes to rub together. It's essentially an economic domino effect that sees the remnants of these policies very active in the world today. For example, it's like your great-great-grandmother or your grandmother being given loans at a very, very low interest rate based off their ethnicity and skin color. Those same homes that they purchased 60, 75 years ago may have cost them $95,000. Those same homes today, depending on the location of where they were purchased, or could be worth over $1 million or even a couple $1 million. So if the grandmother has 3 or 4 grandchildren that want to go to a very nice school, then all she has to do is mortgage that house so that she can be able to do that for her grandkids. And I don't know if you heard the gentleman in the second video, he was talking about the GI Bill. And the GI Bill had benefits for anyone who basically put their lives on the line to serve for this country. So it provided schooling dollars, it provided money for you to be able to go get your first home at a very, very low interest rate. But if you know the history around this, African Americans were heavily denied these benefits, even though they fought and put their lives on the line. So their kids are not going to be afforded these same benefits. And not only that, school revenue is directly tied to the value of the mortgage homes in and around the school's area. So if you happen to live in an area where the mortgage values haven't been illegally depressed based on these shady policies, then your kids are likely to have more educational opportunity at their fingertips, like educational after-school programs, computers, tutors. I think you get the picture. And all you have to do is use your logic to realize what happens on the flip side when your mortgages aren't as valued as the other community.
Latest in our Hidden America series, looking in depth at people and places often overlooked in the headlines. 6 months ago, we heard about Strawberry Mansion High School inside Philadelphia. For 5 straight years, it has been considered one of the most dangerous schools in this country. Located in a neighborhood where 40% of the families live in poverty, the city's highest number of homicides and assaults.
It is the polar opposite of all those positives I just mentioned. So if you are familiar with redlining, write a comment down in the comment section. Just put redlining. And if you're not, put I have no idea. Now, I wanted to dive just a little bit deeper into this to explain what happens in the wake of this dysfunction. So say your great-grandparents or your grandparents have concentrated all this money. They've moved up in the hills because they don't want to be on the ground floor with all the filth. And the lower class people, at some point, they're going to have to move on. They eventually pass and they leave all that money to you and your siblings. So what do you do with it? You decide to open up a business, but unfortunately, where your grandparents purchased their home, those values are just a little too high. So you take your money down to those economically deprived areas because the rent's cheaper, the possibility of renting out a building is cheaper, and then you decide to rent one of those places, open up a cafe, a sandwich shop, a coffee shop, and so on and so forth. And then the prices on your goods and services are raised a little bit so that the local population can't even afford that because they just don't have the money. So now all your friends and family come down to support your business and they tell their friends. So eventually what happens is what we call gentrification. And so the already marginalized and economically deprived locals suffer all over again. Now, I've gotten off the beaten path. I want to go back to the original reason I posted this video, which took place during my search for a new apartment close to the beach. The gentleman that I had met at that apartment who walked me through, talked about everything, eventually called me back about a week later. And he said, hey, I don't know if I told you, but in order for you to live in this area, you have to have a credit score that's at least 800. And I proceeded to tell him, yeah, I do remember you telling me that. He said, okay, fine. I just wanted you to know. About 2 days later, he called me back and he said, hey, you know, the owners of this property, they're really, really serious about who they rent to, but I just need you to really understand that 800 is the bare minimum. I said, yeah, okay, yeah, you just called me a couple days ago to remind me that. So about 3 days passed, we were filling out the paperwork on a different place because first off, my credit score wasn't 800. And I knew anyways that I did not want to live in that community to have to be under all of that pressure and exhaustion every day with people looking at me funny, asking asking me all these weird questions and just making me feel like I didn't fit in. But about 4 days after that, the guy called me back. I guess he thought that I was filling out the paperwork, you know, we made the money, and to remind me again that 800 was the bare minimum. Honestly, from my perspective, that was a modern day redlining. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section, because in my mind, that was clearly a download malfunction.
What you gonna do? What you gonna do?
System malfunction.